All right, here we are. Welcome everybody back to the Marvelous DeMystifiers. We ride again. And already out the gate, a nice tip, super chat from Kyle at Typical New Herbs. He says he uses his neighbors sign in for these Disney Plus shows. So $10 to me instead of to them. I'll take it. That's good. So guys, we have an action-packed episode tonight. Joining us for the first time to demystify some Marvel is Thomas Gorence, aka Paranoid American. Woo woo!
What up, y'all? What up, y'all? Yeah, I got some intro music, but I didn't send it to you, but I'll have to for the next big intro.
Yeah, man. Good to have you on board.
Man? Yeah, bro. I love both of you guys and Slick, bro. We've collaborated before in the past, so I already know this is going to go off the rails immediately, and I love every minute of it.
I apologize in advance that I'm glistening with sweat. It's it's warm. It's the summer. I just want everyone to look at my shininess. Anyway,
is that GQ filter?
This is why we wanted you on the team. So we're talking tonight about Secret Invasion. Probably not a more timely Marvel thing in terms of matching up what's coming out in supposed fiction with the mainstream media, supposed reality. It's also maybe potentially the most Kabbalistic in a sneaky way of the Marvel stuff we've watched so far. Either that or stuff went over our head. I don't know, but we have so much to dig into. We're just going to cover episode 1. There's 3 out currently. So if you want to make sure that you aren't spoiled, maybe pause this and go watch episode 1. If you've not seen it, you're not planning on watching it, that's okay too. You're still going to get a really great look at how to spot secret encoded messages and programming. Some of it not very secret at all. So Gabriel, how you been, man? It's how long since you've been on a show with me? Maybe 3 weeks?
It's been a while, man. Yeah, it's been wonderful. I got my kiddo with me, spending some nice summer vacation together. Took her out to the Michigan dunes the other day. Got to play with her in the ocean. Well, in the splashing waves of Lake Michigan. Telling her all the stories of the Michigan Triangle and the missing ships. And yeah. Nice. Hey, Rachel, good to see you. Yeah, it's great to be back, everybody. Big love, big hugs, everybody. Nice. Hey, Jen. Yeah, man. Stoked to demystify again, man. This is a good one.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't really waste time. I've got 63 slides, so it's not. And about halfway through, I started really like being more selective. But you know how it is. The first scene is always the juiciest, that initiation moment.
Mhm.
So we'll go in a pretty significant blow by blow at the beginning. And then as the episode progresses, it gets more actiony, and the action is less symbolic typically. So here we go. We're talking about Secret Invasion based on I don't know, when did this come out in the comics, Thomas? I feel like this was a Secret Invasion as a title was Brian Michael Bendis arc, maybe in the aughts.
Correct. And then also the main focus, despite the name, kind of focuses on these krill characters, these reptilian like shape-shifting characters, and those ones go back even further into just sort of like a random science fiction, almost like a Treehouse of Horrors style comic. I think it might even been like 30s or 40s or something. It might have been 50s, but it was kind of late on. It was a one-off story, and the gag of the story was that these aliens come to the planet Earth, and they're trying to convince this guy to basically become like a traitor, and they finally offer him the most beautiful woman in the universe. But what they don't tell him is that the most beautiful woman is also a krill. So when she shows up, she's like a horrible krill monster, and then the end. And then I think they made another reappearance in like a 1950s or 60s Silver Surfer episode, where again they were just kind of like this one-off alien race. But over time, they've kind of like developed this big thing. And I really do believe that they kind of use that in Secret Invasion, and they bring in these krill because it's a very powerful archetype, and we can see it replay a bunch of times.
So I think when you're saying krill, you might be referring to the Kree in the Marvel universe. And then these are the Skrulls. Am I getting mixed up here? Maybe you're right.
Well, there's also Skrulls, and then there's a whole bunch of Skrulls. I don't know if they're the exact same race as the I get maybe it's the Kree or the Creole. I don't know how to pronounce it in the exact language, but it basically started as like this one-off joke that was loosely based on older stories from the 30s from like old science fiction magazines. But it's this, you can follow a very specific thread from where it goes from these science fiction novels into this science fiction series from Stan Lee. And I think it was even Ditka that did the artwork for it. It was like a 35 page comic. And then that evolves into like the V series. It evolves into a whole bunch of different Reptilian series. I mean, David Icke. I'm basically saying David Icke got his Reptilians from this thread, this green, lizard colored thread that starts way back in the 1930s at the very latest.
Oh man, I feel like just talking about reptilians would fill an hour. Shapeshifters and reptilians. Maybe before we get into the blow by blow. So how I often like to do it here, Thomas, is I've got a slideshow of screenshots from the film or the episode, and we'll just kind of mosey through the plot and cover off some of the symbolism that's hiding in plain sight. But before that, I got to ask you guys, I'll start with you, Gabriel. Do you believe in reptilians? If yes, what are they, or what form? And if no, why don't you buy it?
Man, I think that I don't buy it in its most literal, sensationalized form.
Oh, they got him. Okay, here's back.
Am I good?
Well, they believe in you. They just kicked you out.
Okay, nice. Yeah, just in its most simplified derivative, if you boil it down to the psychological reptilian brain, the the theory is still substantiates itself enough for me that I do know that our reptilian instinctive mind is what rules the realm, is what makes the world go round.
The
And the
R
fact,
complex, the
yes,
bottom brain.
yep, the fact that they've harnessed the R complex so many hundreds of years ago, I do believe that the reptilian mind is what makes the realm go round. So strictly from a scientific lens, I think, yeah, lizard the world go round.
And I kind of agree with that in a sense. And also, this is a weird one, but if you imagine the reptilian brain that Gabe's talking about, that's almost like at the core. And then like another brain kind of develops on top of that. And then another brain develops on top of that. So it almost speaks as if this reptilian brain, if you were to just go and, create life in some other galaxy somewhere, that might be also the first thing that forms. And if they don't follow the exact same path where like the next layer and the next layer form, there might potentially be, everything has a reptilian brain maybe out there that's organic. And then they just evolve in different ways for the different layers that kind of plop on top. So in that case, there might be some like very real legitimacy to the whole reptile/fish people thing at like a genetic level. So
Yeah.
I believe in that, although I don't believe in the like zap me down and like using space lasers, reptilians that can like transform. But one of David Icke's most recent examples where it's almost these like energy fields that can shift in and out of our dimension because they're almost like a 4-dimension or 5-dimensional creature, like Donald Trump or something, and can just shift and play 5D chess. And I feel like that might be the closest way that I might agree that, okay, yeah, there's shape-shifting reptilian aliens if we classify them as like whatever demons or interdimensional shapeshifters might be. If you want to say that's a reptilian, I'd be like, okay, there's more credit to that.
Okay, so here's my take. I don't buy physical green men from another planet. I don't find it likely that there are reptilian humanoids, physically speaking, on this world. However, in the eons of eternal existence that I do ascribe to, because I don't really believe in a beginning or an end to existence. I see it more as just like an eternal cycle. And there's things like your Bigfoot. I've heard of all kinds of humanoid sightings like kangaroo men, etc. So to me, it's not completely crazy to imagine that maybe there were a different kind of men on the planet or on the world before this type of men was here, us. And if that's the case, if there ever were more reptilian type men, scaly men, whatever, their spiritual essence could potentially still exist here tied to this realm if they follow and operate by the same rules that we do, which is that if you pass away and you don't go into the light and move on into your next, metempsychosis, next existence, you can roam this realm as a hungry ghost, or even, I think that there are spirit entities that have the ability to siphon and gather essence or power or life force to themselves and become more and more capable of some kind of agency in the world. And so if there were, so there's a lot of ifs here, but maybe there were reptile men, maybe they're all died out. Maybe some of them stuck around as disincarnate spirits. And then, for the shapeshifting part of it, the shamanic description of shapeshifting is typically not that the person wears the body of another being, that they change their body into that being, but instead a type of projecting of consciousness into another body. And, that doesn't sound that outrageous to me, that a more powerful mind or will could sort of jump in the driver's seat of a body that has a less powerful will. So all that, in the mix, maybe there are reptilian spirit entities, and maybe they have the power to, whether it requires some kind of consent or just a weak-minded individual, or both are possible. Maybe there's a shape-shifting going on in terms of them taking over the bodies of human beings, but not actually like one body becoming another body. That's sort of where I'm at with it all.
If you take the scales away, you've kind of just described an influencer, like a really popular influencer. right? They project like their own consciousness and their own version of reality onto all these, weaker minded people that then are like, that's my reality. That's the world that I live in, even though it doesn't exist, right?
And I know a lot of people with firsthand accounts while on psychedelics running into reptilian beings, required that kind of expanded spiritual vision, but people I trust their trip reports, if you will. So that's not something physical or provable, but there's got influencers definitely nails it, by the way. That's hilarious. So, okay, now that we've got our stances on reptilians all laid out, I feel like that's important that we have that groundwork exploration done. Gabe, what are your preliminary thoughts on this first episode of Secret Invasion?
Well, one thing that's really fascinating is the xenophobia and all the race baiting and all the the classic triggers that we see in a lot of the Marvel, but it seems to be kicked off just in time for another migrant invasion from the South, seasonally speaking. It's like it had to be this time of the year, this year, that this film comes out. It's like so politically seasonal. It never ceases to amaze me. So that comes to mind, the fact that the characters, their password to get into the rebel base is like, what do you want? Is to be comfortable in my own skin. It's very, very, very triggering for a lot of people, quite by design. So that's going to be on my radar. And also, of course, the disclosure, the alien disclosure thing. It's like they're just pulling out all the stops on all the triggers of all time, which kind of plays it. Ultimately, my theory is that so many of us are aware that the UFO and the Project Bluebeam is coming that it's almost like this is our vaccination. This is our desensitization to potential future psychological operations. And they're just getting it all out of it's like a cabin in the woods. They're showing us all the tricks in the bag all at once. So we can all say, nope, it's all bullshit. And I think ultimately down the line, to increase our sense of skepticism for the sake of a good psychological immune system.
It's funny that you use vaccination as an example here, because legitimately the last time that I had to go to Walgreens or CVS to go and pick something up, they had free Avengers Marvel comic books that were all promoting the vaccine, and it was all about how like the doctors and the pharmacists and the teachers that are all helping you get injected, that they're the true heroes and they're the real superheroes. But it also was like within the whole Marvel sort of canon, like they revealed like a technology that you would only know about if you had read some like esoteric version of Hulk. So it was inside the Marvel universe, but it's also just a completely free Pfizer funded comic book that you can just pick up anywhere. And man,
what a great 9/11 too.
Well, they do 9/11, and where else they did that is where the military used to just drop comic books that were just full of propaganda on villages and like where places they were trying to kind of like help overthrow. And that's actually what kind of inspired a lot of this comic book medium, was how effective that was at getting especially the youth to understand these like incredibly abstract and high level concepts that you can't do necessarily just through words, but all of a sudden you pair that with pictures and bam, you can convey, here's the Hermetic principle illustrated all of a sudden. So I think there's a big aspect to that too. And then I also think, and we're already doing spoiler alerts for the first episode.
Oh yeah, this is full spoiler. No
so
holds barred.
At the very end of the first episode, they basically reveal that this, I'm not going to give a full breakdown spoiler, but they reveal that a very important character all along was one of these reptilian shapeshifters. And what they do with planting that little nugget at the end of the first episode, one is they make a very convenient writer's sort of mechanic where like anything can happen now, but they also are letting that as a viewer that, hey, like no matter who you're seeing right now, even as you're looking at Samuel L. Jackson, don't be surprised if we just reveal in a random episode, oh, by the way, he was a shapeshifter. So it seeds this feeling of kind of like distrust and surreal, like simulation kind of theory on the show right from the very get-go. So you can kind of tell that the story is going to get wild and they're probably going to pull some crazy punches.
Good stuff, guys. All right, well, let's jump in and start the play-by-play. Here we go. Actually, let me put up this screen. This is it's very important, right, that we get the first shot is always so important. So first things first, Moscow, present day, which means 6/21/2023, the solstice in June. That's important. I'll come back later. Just wanted to make sure that's clear. So what we'll do as I'm going through this and kind of reading from my notes, please feel free to interrupt or jump in or have me pause on a screen. And otherwise, I'll just kind of try to keep the train going.
Yeah, I'll just inject banter from the peanut gallery here and there.
Yeah, or just full on take the floor. All good.
You know, Chance, the last time we saw present day was the exact same font from from Captain America Part 3 that we did last time on the last DeMystifiers, and it was right before the scene where they were basically recapping all the dimensions of the JFK assassination. And it was it was WandaVision, and she's stirring her coffee cup, and they flash that present day on the screen as they're doing the Nescafe commercial, literally tapping the coffee cup just like the Nescafe commercial. So I just wanted to point that out, that there is not just a common theme, but they're using the exact same font again, and they're presenting their hand. Present yod. They're showing their hand.
Yeah, they can't help themselves. There's a lot of tipping of the yod. Okay, so first of all, this character we're seeing, the first character in the show, his name is Ross. And it seems innocuous, right? His name is Ross. No big deal. But when we see some of the other ways that this name ties into themes of this show, the name Ross is not an accident. And it kind of makes me wonder how the theme of wisdom, or the head of the head of society, the wisdom or the wise leaders, because that's what Ross means, R-A-S, Ras, like a Rastafari. Comes from the Etruscan Rasena. Dylan's in the chat. He'll probably fill us in more. But that's important, okay? Because this idea of the head and of wisdom is repeated throughout this show. Not to mention that I feel like once we find out a little later on in this scene that this is a Skrull, and he's a evil. Even the word Skrull sounds like skull, which is a head. The talking heads that give wisdom from alchemical lore and even regular religious mythology, like Odin with Mimir's head. So revealing right away, in terms of if this show has got some revelation of the method going on, which I think it does, that the cult of wisdom is the culprit behind all the type of schemes and scams you see going on in this episode. So
well, I would almost reword it. The way that I've come to understand it is it's not necessarily a cult of wisdom or like Illuminati or revolutionary thinkers, but I think it more represents intelligence agencies, specifically sort of clandestine intelligence agencies.
Yeah, that's intelligence agencies that learned a lot of the way that they operate also from the protocols of secret societies. They're like a I wouldn't even say pseudo secret society. There's no doubt that there are.
Well, it's just a corporate version. It's the version that has to report to the some version of the IRS, or have some sort of accountability and hierarchy that outlives its current people that are inside of it.
There you go. Then I just think it's interesting to see this guy going through some underground tunnels. I may have been a little overly zealous with screen captures from the first scene, but
There's the yellow brick road.
yeah, the underground.
Yeah, and it had me thinking about the JFK assassination because of there is that theory that one of the shots came from the gutter,
Yep.
From down below.
Yeah, storm drain, right?
That's it, storm drain. We all float down here.
So there's a voiceover happening as we see this Ross character. And I'm just going to read. This is maybe not exactly a direct quote, kind of a paraphrase, but we hear this character, Prescott. Strange name. Probably something in it, but I didn't think about it too much.
Could it be Prescott and they just like misspelled it for the captioning?
Could be, but that's just demonstrative of how the D and T are interchangeable letters. 100% interchangeable.
Good point.
And even if I think that you can drop the first letter off of a lot of names that you read in mythology and occult history, like Ptolemy, for example, drop the P. It's Ptolemy. You don't say the P. So if we were looking at this as type of priest character, symbolically a priest character, you might be able to drop the P off of his name and just see what you get. And then you get Res, which is the same as Ross. And then you get Cod, which with the G to GC interchange is God. So it's right there kind of hiding in this name, Prescott, God of wisdom. It's there. I mean, it's anecdotal, right? But it's there. And then his voiceover in this party says, information, imagine a world, imagine, if you will, a world where information can't be trusted. The news says one thing, internet says another. Society starts to fray. All we can turn to are the people we care about. But what if, no, he's got a really deep voice. So, but what if those people weren't who we thought they were? What if the ones closest to us, the ones we've trusted our whole lives, were something else entirely? What if they weren't even human?
I mean, but do they love you? Do they care for you when you're sick? Isn't that all that matters?
It's a very important monologue, though, because it's setting us up to reveal the post-truth world. Like you just mentioned, Thomas, any character at any time could be someone else. It's all very simulation-y.
The text that you've got in this one screenshot, I think, summarizes the best. Imagine a world where information can't be trusted. And it's funny that it says imagine. It's like, what do we need to imagine beyond what we've kind of got right now where information can't be trusted?
Yeah.
Like how much worse is it really going to get? And to answer my own rhetorical question, I feel like we are just in the baby years. We are like, we just crawled out of the swamp
before we dive in.
Yeah, dude.
We're on the diving board taking a deep breath.
Yeah, we haven't even dipped our toe in to check the temperature.
Yeah, man. And then the other thing about this opening monologue is, in context of the whole scene, it's throwing out the green light to the normies who watch this to distrust the conspiracy theorists in their life and dehumanize them, as we saw a lot of during the cooties thing.
But you could also watch it in reverse and then be like, if I'm a conspiracy theorist, these are all the normies. And they're the ones that are going to be or just they're literally the reptilians, like the lady on the plane, right? Like that guy is actually a real reptilian.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. It goes both ways, Thomas. Good point. It goes both ways. And I'm probably intentionally so. They know the amount of people interested in conspiratorial information is rising. And they know this little speech isn't going to turn somebody off who's already lifted up enough rocks and seen what's under them to distrust everything mainstream forever. How many times do you realize, does it take when you realize someone's lied to you, how many lies before you're just like, all right, it's all lies. I don't trust this. I'll never trust it again. But
But do
it's
they care for you when you're
effective.
sick?
In a divide and conquer sense, it's very effective for, both sides of the divide to hear the speech and be like, the normies, they're not even human. The conspiracy theorists, they're not even human.
And one other quick thing on this too, I find this really fascinating, but when I mentioned that this is just a repeating of this very strong same archetype, again, like even the series V from the 80s that was then remade in like the 2000s, I think, which is about reptilian shapeshifter aliens that come to Earth and pretend that they're here for our benefit, and then it turns out that they're not. Big surprise. But even that itself was actually based on an old story by Sinclair Lewis called "It Can't Happen Here," and that book, "It Can't Happen Here," had nothing to do with aliens or reptilians or anything. It was actually about the German Nazi Party. What if that had come to rise in the United States, where it's so subtle? It's like that boiling a frog sort of syndrome, where it happens so subtly and people get divided over this long period of time. And they just kind of made it way more obvious in the V series, where, okay, we can't really say that different friends and workers have different political parties. Now they're literally different, aliens or different species. One of them is just wearing the other one's skin, but that's the story that they're really trying to seed. And it's that, that the othering of people, just like, Germany did. It's the othering of people. And in this case, it's, it's just as blatant as V ever was, basically.
Yeah, man, the othering, it's required for it. Empire requires it, any form of empire. So then we see some shots of, the crazy, classic crazy conspiracy bulletin board.
You got to have it.
You got to have it.
They feel so inefficient though with with a computer now. Wouldn't you just put all this in some kind of software? I don't know. It would take a while to do all the string and the yarn and the thumbtacks. And what if you add like a new face? You got to rearrange all the pictures and all the thumbtacks every time you add something new to it. They never show that part though.
Well, we now see though the key buzzword here: mass shooting. Gabe, you want to jump in?
Yeah. Oh, I just love this scene because it reminds me of my dry erase board so much.
Does your dry erase board also say mass shooting on the top?
No, but I'm gonna turn my back of my dry erase board into a cork board just so I can have something that looks like this.
If you don't have actual red string, then you haven't hit peak conspiracy theorist yet.
That's right. That's right. I'm saving up.
I mean, need I say more? This is basically the Charlie from It's Always Sunny meme.
Totally.
Even the
I wonder
tie
where
is
this
pretty
originated. I assume this came from the JFK movie by Oliver Stone, was it? But I don't know. I don't know where. I'm just interested where this original meme came from. Who was the first guy to be going out of his mind with a big, board in front of him in red string? It had to come from somewhere.
Yeah, I wonder. It makes me think of the. There's an investigator on the JFK case from New Orleans. I forget his name, but he had a very unique style of investigation. And you think it had to do with maps. He was the first guy to actually include people's living proximity into their profile. But yeah, this guy, his name was Prescott, right?
Prescott.
And so it's we got Prescott Bush, which is a quintessential conspiracy theorist entry fee is don't you know what about Prescott Bush? And then at some point, he ends up. I think he sees through Ross's disguise. I think because of something Ross says is when he realizes that Ross is not Ross before he pounces on him.
I think it's the reaction. He doesn't. He seems. Well, either way, it's intense point. But I wanted to point out too that this chaos is he's talking about 5 global terrorist attacks in the past year claimed by different groups. This is his words. But the fact that it's claimed by 5 different groups is what they want you to think. It's all actually the same group.
Exactly.
I couldn't help but notice too, chaos is 5 letters. I feel like that's a synchronicity here.
Yeah, that I think there's probably something to that. And then in terms of it's all actually the same group, I personally think that's how the intelligence agencies operate. I don't think that the countries are really as at odds with each other as they seem in the media. I think it's somewhere these quote unquote terrorist groups are conjoined at the head. Maybe not, they're compartmentalized, right? That's military 101. But I think this to me is like this order out of chaos description is to me classic conspiracy theory.
I could see it in a few different contexts. I feel like at its most organized or cohesive, it would almost be like a big mafia family thing where anytime another bigger family can come and take over, but they essentially establish some sort of standards and rules. But I think it's probably
like
a little bit messy. It's probably like way messier than the mafia. But I think that shows like this and just the general concept of having one big boogeyman, like this global Illuminati, I actually think that compartmentalization is what lots of, if there were, this is going to sound paradoxical, but if there were an Illuminati, they would prefer to kind of have everyone focused in one direction because it's way more convenient, just like monotheism, right? It's like it's like a scapegoating version of monotheism where you just assume this is always the fault of this particular way of thinking or group. And if you can get everyone to buy into like a visual image of here's the thing that you should be putting all your hate and distrust towards and blame, that just feels like it makes people so much more easy to manipulate, the compartmentalization of it.
You make a good point too. The mafia nature of the actual power structures of the world. I mean, government is pretty obviously mafia.
But they could also point to the mafia and be like, oh, look how bad those guys are. And then meanwhile, they're doing like 10 times the job just with nicer shirts and, less accents.
So it's not so much like there's a top they, if you will. You make a good point about it's more conducive to the whole doing business to have everyone pointing the finger at one scapegoat. I feel like that's what the Jews are there for largely, for conspiracy culture. Not saying that there isn't a there when it comes to the tiny hat culture, but my point being really it's probably like you say, more of a mafia style, multiple families that are working together to do business of a certain kind. And so they have mutually beneficial goals. I think that's probably more true to life rather than there being like one God Emperor secret master. Okay, we already looked at the Charlie meme. So here, though, he mentions Argentina attacks Colombia. Colombia attacks the Philippines, talking about this chaos. So, you heard it here first, guys. If Colombia attacks the Philippines, Disney was in on it. And we should point out, though, the time of this show coming out does really coincide with a lot of hyped up Russia stuff. We'll get to that as we go.
And the blue beam, of course.
And the blue beam. Yeah.
Although that's never gone away, right? There's always been, at least every 5 to 10 years, there's always a huge blue beam alien movie to just keep you prepared, keep you on your toes. Ever since, War of the Worlds, probably.
So here he's saying a violent chain reaction consuming the globe.
He's already lying to you.
He says, do you realize the entire world is at war? So I feel like this is, an obvious nod to the way World War I actually happened or, publicly happened, the entangling alliances, which is what all the cable news talking heads want us to be afraid of happening with NATO and the Ukraine, and probably not even supposed to say the word Ukraine. Oh well. We are on YouTube.
It's definitely on the list. But you have to just be, like worshiping them, and then they'll let it through.
And then this line, he says to Agent Ross, there is an architect to that tension, Agent Ross. I feel like that's basically, if you just remove, or if you just change the emphasis, there is an architect to that tension, Agent Ross. Not like talking to Agent Ross, but saying the agents of, the intelligence, Ross, the agents of wisdom, intelligence agents are the architects of the tension of the entangling, chaotic, world at war alliance situation. We should just be, Dylan says we should just be promoting Ukraine, and then we'll get more views.
He's not wrong. I literally read the updated YouTube requirements today, and it has like a special section on there that if you say anything, that's like derogatory or just not supportive, then it'll get dinged. But if you're supportive of it, then it doesn't get dinged, and it probably does give you a little boost. So go Ukraine. Go Ukraine.
We're supposed to support war. Okay.
Wow. That's
Go Lockheed. Go
Logan
Lockheed
says,
Martin. Go Ukraine. Go all you guys.
This is all parody anyway. None of this counts.
In Minecraft.
Okay, so it started 30 years ago when the Skrulls found Earth. Bum, bum, bum. So, of course, we got to go back and just consider what's 30 years ago, right? If they're giving us 30 years ago. Now, this has backstory in the Captain Marvel movie. Not really worth watching, but it's where the Skrulls get introduced. So 30 years ago, on the dot, on the equinox or solstice, June 21st, 1993. That's when the NASA Endeavour shuttle allegedly did the first flight of S.A.B.E.R, which is a supposed pressurized laboratory in orbit.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah.
Nice dig.
Well, that really fits the theme of Nick Fury being on a space station.
Right. It does. It also kind of fits in with the nostalgia spell that we've been talking about. That like fashion.
It targets 30 years back.
It targets the 30 years back, which puts everybody's mind in a position to be anticipating another 9/11. If we're constantly being sent back in a dreamy state to 30 years ago, we're also being constantly set up to be have a sense that something big is on the horizon, another 9/11 on the way. Nice.
While I was looking into June 21st, 1993, apparently on January 1st, 1970 is where they begun the Unix epoch counting, which is basically where, like, I don't know, this is for computers or something. They started counting time in seconds, individual seconds since 1/1/1970. So it's been 205,728 hours between 1/1/1970 and 6/21/1993. And according to the internet, if we named this day after a polygon, it will be called Hecta Hepta Conta Digon Day. Hecta Hepta.
Whoa.
That's pretty cool.
Just thought that was fun. There's kind of no point to that, but going back to the theme of 30 years ago, though, very important to remember as well that it's not exactly 30 years ago, but it's near 30 years ago that the 1991 Soviet coup attempt, also known as the August coup, a failed attempt by hardliners of the Soviet Union Communist Party to forcibly seize control from Gorbachev. This essentially led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. right? The USSR falls. So the entire story arc of who Russia is to the world in its current form began 30 years ago, which is, I think, highly relevant to the plot of this show. I don't think it's an accident that it was 30 years ago.
I can't remember what I was doing 30 years ago. Was that 90s? Is it? We're talking, yeah, early 90s, right?
I was dressing up like the Red Ranger. I was 4.
I mean, it's definitely peak nostalgia era, and I think
Yeah.
that, I mean, since this is Marvel too, it's hard to ignore the fact that Marvel is just based on nostalgia. What Marvel's doing now is this 30-year cycle, because 30 years is essentially a generation, right? So within 30 years, it's time to make all the old things new again, and vice versa. So now I'm gonna take the things that I was doing as a kid, you know, Power Rangers. Watch, you know, the Power Ranger revival is probably going to be on the tail end of this in the next 5 to 10 years, where all of a sudden there's like an adult Power Range movie that you're going to bring your kids to and get them kind of indoctrinated into, the same way that Star Wars works, the same way that Sesame Street works. Like all of these things, why would you not perpetuate this legacy if you were these corporate people? So in this particular instance, we're talking about Marvel, which you're already watching for nostalgic reasons, and now they're putting you back into the 90s, which is like the peak Marvel nostalgia time period. So I mean, I think that there's also just like a keep getting, you know, you're deeper and deeper into the trance. Like there's that aspect to it right now.
Right.
Like in
And
nostalgia
Not to mention,
inception.
if you target the 30-year window, you're getting people's prime, their prime productivity loosed from them by however much they decided to spend on entertainment.
Right. Yeah. You know, so theoretically, we would be landing right around 93, which puts it right around the First World Trade Center, puts it around Waco, when McVeigh was getting trained up. And also 93 is a, thelemic number. And I think there's a 193 comes into the weave here in a second,
Good
which is
call.
pretty significant. 93 is also when that's when the UFC was kind of kicking off in its earliest successes. It was seeded in 93.
Well, you're just catering to that Rockfin crowd now. Let's keep it going.
I forgot to add that if you remember, everyone listening, if you saw our talk on Multiverse of Madness, the Doctor Strange movie, the Illuminati features in that film. The Illuminati in the Marvel Universe, the secret organization of Professor X and Iron Man and Mr. Fantastic and whoever else, was created to secretly confront the Skrulls. So, the Illuminati and Skrull connection has always been in the mix.
The Reptilians working against the Illuminati. Yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, then we get the reveal that Nick Fury, he's on S.A.B.E.R, which is a space station. We've never been given what the acronym S.A.B.E.R stands for, the space station that he's on. In the comics, it's called SWORD, which it means Sentient Weapon Observation and Response Division. Sometimes it's Secret World or Sentient World Observation and Response Division. So don't know what the acronym is. Sentient Weapon is an interesting idea, but I can't help but notice that it's basically he's old Saint Nick at the top of the world, when he's up there on S.A.B.E.R.
Totally. That also that kind of triggers the Black Knight satellite, which means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Oh, nice. Illuminati cards were in 93. Nice.
Right.
But the Black Knight satellite has kind of brought up a few ideas on my radar along my path. But one thing, this is really obscure, is Psalms 91. Psalms 91 talks about this God figure who has prepared a tower for his acolytes or his followers, the faithful ones, or in some places he has built a palace, a place for us in the afterlife, basically. But the name of the god in its original language was Elion. The god's name is Elion, and it's not in some translations. They translate it to the lion. He is like a lion, but the name is Elion. It's basically Elon. And so I took a clip of that Psalms 91, and I put it next to the Black Knight satellite, next to Thoth Tahuti, who is like Saint Nick, keeping a list and checking it twice and making sure if you're naughty or nice, see if you're going to get into heaven. And then I put that the quote of Psalms with Elon basically having it comes across as Elon has a satellite in heaven for all the good people to ascend into his promised land.
Only one? I guess there's only going to be a few people in heaven.
They
couldn't afford their own satellite. That's the trick, is that you actually have to get rich enough to own your own satellite, and that's how you get into heaven. And that's what they want to keep us from knowing.
Wait a second, does the Black Knight satellite look a lot like that submarine when you turn it backwards?
Oh, the Shamir?
Oh man, don't give it away, Gabe. That's more of episode 3 thing. The submarine. Submarine does prominently play out in the plot of this series. Nice. Coinciding with the exact same time that the big Ocean Gate submarine ritual happened.
That's gonna be the joke. That's gonna be the joke that just gives all year.
I grabbed this screenshot to show the deck of cards laid out in a solitaire formation here.
Yeah, man.
Indicative of how the conspiracy theorist is meant to be isolated. I'm sure we all can relate to that.
Right. And like how many conspiracy theorists did they supplement with the lockdowns? You know what I mean? It's like a lot of people who probably weren't that kind of personality, they are now.
It could have, who knows, maybe the whole Coke and Pepsi red versus blue thing was just falling off and they needed a different type of divide to conquer through.
Right.
Seems to be.
I feel like too, on those cards, you can also make the connection of the conspiracy theorists and people that would like consult the tarot, right? Because what else are playing cards other than the original tarot decks? And did you notice, were there any trump cards in that screenshot, or was it all?
It's too hard to make out. That's about all you get to see it, unless I missed it. So we don't see what cards are actually there. Do you have some kind of AI that can do it for us, Thomas?
Maybe, but can you trust it?
We're doing great, guys. 53 minutes in, we're on the first scene. This is how it normally goes. But then that Prescott guy gets killed. We don't actually see who kills him. I guess it may have been this Ross character. He goes through a rooftop chase scene, jumping on roofs. It's very The Matrix, jumping from roof to roof. And then he dies by falling off a roof in a classic CIA assisted suicide.
R.I.P. Frank Olson.
I mean, I'm right about that, right? Isn't that a thing? Like people falling off balconies and out of windows, and like Eric Clapton and
falling out of bulletproof, like double paned glass windows that aren't even meant to be opened. Yeah, it happens all the time, but only if you're around a CIA agent. It's the weirdest thing, dude.
And that also that jumping from one rooftop to the next is like kind of a summer solstice. Jumping across that chasm, the 3 days in suspension.
So then we get the opening credits. I only grabbed one screenshot from it, but I could kind of scan through it. Thomas, what do you think, man? This is very obviously AI generated.
Yeah, I'm a fan, although I honestly felt like they could have done a lot better. Like if you gave me whatever budget that they had, unless someone did it on the weekend, for free. Like I don't know, man. This is very doable. Like all three of us here with just a little bit of training could remake this entire intro. I have no question about it, and I think that's cool for some reasons. And I think it's also the thing when I started working at Disney, you start watching movies and it ruins it for you because now you're just like, oh, the light source doesn't make sense for this particular explosion in the CGI scene, and everyone else is just like, whoa, explosion, you know what I mean? And I'm like, well, the light source would technically be coming from this top right angle, but I think that aspect of this particular one, it's also like it's going to keep getting bigger and better, but also that clip, right? What happens when you can no longer trust information? And we're talking about AI in regular world, and then bam, here you go. Here's a completely AI generated intro, clearly using stable diffusion and not even using a high like sampler. They're probably using something called a Euler ancestral sampler with not many steps, just because it looks like it was made efficiently. So anyways, dude, I love the intro and I hate the intro, but overall it's net positive for me.
Right.
I think it's indicative of a lowering of budgets for this type of stuff.
When it might have been
there was a couple of years
bypassing-
ago where like TV, streaming TV series got a lot of budget thrown at them. Every idea was greenlit. And, I'm thinking like The Witcher, really high budget stuff. And now it seems like they're having to pull back on that because the subscriptions or whatever is not doing it for them. Maybe too many of their viewers are gone because of the cooties, cowpokes. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Something's up with that though, and I feel like
when there's strikes going on, man, that you've got animator and artist strikes and writer strikes going on, and this
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're still going on right now. And what this does is it's like you don't need an animator or an illustrator to do this entire sequence. You already got them. You know what I mean? You just train an AI on everything that you've already commissioned from them for the last 20 years. And I actually think that this is kind of a cool thing for comics in particular, because once Marvel and DC, if they were to like pull ahead, just like Google and some of the other company, OpenAI and stuff are doing, they could train something on all of their classic and best Disney scenes and make it so that they didn't necessarily have to hire illustrators or animators. They'd be hiring what you'd call keyframers that kind of just like set the coolest looking parts of the scene, and then AI does the rest. And we could almost have like a resurgence of like a renaissance of really badass animation. Like imagine an actual comic book animated. And I think we're a little bit far off with this intro that we're looking at right now, because all this AI has like a certain trademark look to it where you're like, okay, yeah, I know that's AI, but that's not going to be around forever. That's like a little burr that gets, brushed off the edge over the next 2 or 3 years, I think.
So I gotta give props to PK. He gave me some good info as we were planning for this episode. And what you just said, in regards to what you just said, you don't even need writers for this show. Just maybe 1 or 2 good Kabbalists. Really needed. Right. But apparently at the part during the chase scene, at the first scene, that all the license plates had 7s, and he goes up 7 stories to the roof, and Zayin is the 7th Hebrew letter. Put that in your pocket. That will come back later. That's important. Good catch, PK.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Jennifer, she says, is that the infamous Scheele's green or Scheele's green, which is also known as Skloss green? Basically, it's a type of paint that was in favor in the mid 19th century. It's basically this kind of ugly dark green, and people were dying of like arsenic poisoning, if I'm not mistaken, from that. But it was like really popular up until the dawn of the 20th century. And then they stopped using it as a pigment and started using it as an insecticide and up into the 30s.
Whoa. Trippy. Yeah. Well, one thing that we've been seeing a lot in the DeMystifiers is, we've been calling it the triggering green, which I learned that during the World Wars in Germany, they were vilifying the color of money. systematically through their propaganda and making all things associated with money into disgusting or evil or diabolical. So it's really fascinating that we're talking about replacing artists with AI, and the color choice for the demonstration here is the green, which is the color of the aliens, the color of the lizards, camouflaged, but it's also the color of, the garden, that garden of abundance.
Good catch from Jenny. Also, that the 7 being a big part of this, obviously being a Kabbalistic thing.
Nice.
G for Gravik, main character, and Gaia, a main character, both start with G. And then the other scroll that's a main character is Telos, and a T is a 7 also in septenary gematria. The Green New Deal. Yeah, and that's the thing too, is I've been seeing a lot of articles lately, Carrie. Thanks for that comment about how conspiracy theorists' new crazy thing is that climate lockdowns. Obviously, that's crazy to believe in that. Conspiracy theorists are anti-environment. They hate the environment.
And I want to point out too that green represents Venus, or the Morning Star, or the Illuminati,
and the heart. It's the heart chakra as well. And this show begins it kicked off at the beginning of Cancer season. Right. And we'll finish in Leo, and Leo is the heart of the zodiac. I also think it's appropriate that it was born in Cancer, because Cancer has to do with like comforts, coziness, all of that type of sort of maternal, nurturing type of vibe. And it's also the keystone in Royal Arch Masonry. Cancer is the directly above, the straight up sign, and that's where Nick Fury begins the show. He begins the series. He's up, straight up,
right
at the keystone of the arch, because he's trying to be comfortable and avoid his discomforts of life on Earth and doing his job. So the next scene after the intro is him coming down in a beam of light. He's the savior's returning, basically,
Yeah, I noticed the same thing PK noticed. I had made a note of it, that there are 7 stories on the building and 7 lights. And another thing, just a strange pattern that just kept coming up, to the extent that I just felt like they were kind of hitting us over the head with it, was there were mini lamps. And the type of lamp that kept getting flashed, just at least in this first episode, was specifically like the Pixar style lamp. Do you guys remember the desk lamp that I'm talking about?
Which actually comes from the Brave Little Toaster, which is its own rabbit hole. But yeah.
What? Really?
Yeah, because Brave Little Toaster were these like appliances that came to life, but it wasn't as easily commercialized as toys that come to life. Yes. But the guys that worked on Brave Little Toaster eventually went on to Pixar. So that little lamp, I firmly believe that kind of transitioned over. It was a syncretism, right? That was like Zeus being adopted by the new guard and changing the name.
There is so much to that. Like, I just kind of so many things come to mind, and I think you're right. This is a huge rabbit hole, I think. But the idea of I think it's hinting to, or seeding the mind, or we're being steered to think about that. They're calling it the Internet of Things, right? Where your refrigerator is going to be able to tell you how many slices of bread are left, and it's going to be able to have a picture of what kind of mold is growing on your cucumbers. And but what was fascinating about that is it's like we're kind of being steered into the animism, and having like a commie spirit type of spirituality integrated into our worldview, which is something to really think about, because just the fact that they flashed, I think, probably 10 to 12 different little Pixar lamps throughout this one episode is just telling me that they are uh, hinting towards the idea of things having inanimate objects having consciousness. I'll just say it that way.
Sorry for how dark some of the screenshots are. I brightened up some of them. This one's not very good, but the first thing we see of Fury is he's grunting as he comes off of the spaceship and clutching at his right knee. So pull that damn right knee. Now I don't know what kind of awareness of the biofield anatomy writers of this show would have, but the injury to the right knee represents feeling blocked by impossible obstacles or challenges, which is pretty much right up bang on for where Fury's been at. He's just been stalling and hiding out on the space station because he feels like the challenges and obstacles of being the top head spy, head intelligence agent is too much. So they got that right symbolically with the right knee. Then he goes and meets up with Talos, and Talos shows him this plant that comes from the Skrull homeworld, apparently, called Santo Milica. So that's basically, apparently that's Skrullish language, but that's Santo would be like saint, you know.
Yeah, like milk of the saints, right?
Well, that's a good weave. I went with Milica as the Arabic and Sanskrit name for the flower jasmine, which is Malika, but Malika, basically you're saying the same thing. And in the language of flowers, the jasmine to the Hindus, who call it Malika, represents the everlasting love between a married couple. Or in Chinese, it's the same thing for Buddhism, forever love. In the West, it's maybe more associated with purity, but still love. And he got it from his wife, and she is dead. Bum, bum, bum. So, symbolically, to call this alien flower by an Arabic or Sanskrit name for jasmine is accurate to the language of flowers for what this scene is depicting, that, you know, he still has everlasting love for his dead wife, reptile lady. So I thought that was fun. And so we also see, we got something.
They talk about that the plant is adopted to the earthly environment, right? So it's gone through some sort of adaptation.
Dylan points out, is it the knee or a golden thigh? That's a good question.
Nice.
If he's the savior, then it could be the thigh. Pythagorean symbolism.
Very nice.
Good call. We'll keep that in our back pocket for future episodes. See if the thigh Pythagoras Bacchus thing holds water. I do think he's like he's the black savior. Makes sense.
It would be
but I also have to point out that the Fury eye patch is missing. That's kind of like the only requirement to the character design is an eye patch. So
they bring that up in the third episode.
I don't remember what they say about that in the third episode, but I took it as symbolic that when he was the top spy, you know, he had that in an esoteric sense, his eye had become single. That's why he had wisdom. And now his vision, his eye is no longer single. So he's not on his game. Talos tells him, after the blip, you were different. So we've already went in depth on the symbolism of the blip, which is like I think they want it to be for the real world. And Cooties, it's going to be a part of the backstory of everything Marvel forever. But the blip, the 5-year blip for anyone that's missing out on what that means, is from the Avengers movies where half of all life in the universe was deleted from existence for 5 years. Yeah. And given that that's a big COVID allegory, like really obviously a COVID allegory at the time, I know people personally, people I like a lot, or family members I love, who will say, after I got Cooties, they don't call it Cooties because they believe in it, I've not been the same. I know people that their health went downhill from the so-called treatments they received for that. And they've been struggling ever since. Not that they're victims of that. They could make a different choice, but it's like a great offer to be victimized. Like, oh, I can just slowly spiral downward and decline. I have this great narrative to attach my victimhood to that everyone can agree with. And
I've seen a scary version of this, and it was someone that had lost the sense of smell and taste for like over a year, right? Like a very long term and perhaps permanent condition where the two senses that are the most linked to memories are just gone from your life. And they were like, well, this makes it so much easier to go on a diet because I just don't taste anything anymore. So I could just eat like rice and water and I'll be on my way. And it's such a weird way of permanently adapting. I mean, there's obviously an aspect to that of telling yourself it's all going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. You don't need to taste anymore. Like, don't be so hard on yourself. But also like, wow, man, that would just be crazy to lose two of your senses immediately and never get them back. Like, we don't have that many we're in the single digits. You know what I mean? Even if you're superhuman, you're still in the single digits of senses. So to lose two of them is pretty massive way on how you interpret reality in the outside world, period.
Dylan says, look up Malacca in Greek.
I don't think that's what they were referring to, but it could be.
Do you know what that meant? I didn't know what that meant.
Saint Malacca.
Apparently it's a man who masturbates. Which, it is fitting to the guy who lost his wife. He's probably, not got a lot of options anymore. Oh, man. So then we're getting the backstory about how Fury is supposed to help them find a home. Talos' daughter is mentioned. She's angry that their people don't still have a home. What other people have a history of diaspora? Are they a priestly nation, you might say? Because I think that there's an allegory here with the scrolls that they are the Jews. We are in conspiracy culture here. This whole show is allegorical for that. That's my 2 cents. People that don't have a proper home or have been kicked out of their home. And later in the series, we find out that they weren't just poor victims losing their home to someone else. They brought it on themselves with their aggressive warmongering nature.
Well, I mean, any good scapegoat both warrants the pity that that they like kind of get from being outcast, but a good scapegoat is also doing something that you're like, see, that was your fault. You know what I mean? So I mean, I think it fills that role. It doesn't even have to be a specific Zeus or any kind of group. It's that archetype of both being the subject of like, oh my God, I can't believe what they're going through, but they kind of deserve what they're going through. Like, that's a very specific archetype that plays out in a lot of these like epic stories.
Oh, we brought up the Jays, and now Juan is here.
Now Juan wants his money.
He always
Do you have to pay a homunculus money? I thought that was like one of the perks is they just do shit for free. And now I got this dude like trying to collect like homunculus support from the courts.
So then we're seeing them sit around the table. Maria Hill, Nick Fury, and Talos. They're talking about, Gravik and his evil plan. Apparently these scrolls are, quote, immune to radioactivity, end quote, which means, immune to radioactivity means that you're aware that it doesn't exist as described.
Exactly.
Yeah, does not play with the rules of normal physics is basically what they're saying.
Well, with the rules of normal physics that normies believe in.
Right.
I don't know. Have you gone down the
guy said
rabbit
gloves.
holes of no such thing as nuclear weapons before, Thomas?
Yeah. I mean, it's a fun one, but it doesn't make my top 100 yet.
I personally, all I needed was to see the map with pins dropped in it everywhere that allegedly a nuclear bomb was tested over time. And it's like, oh, well, if this was what they told us it is, the world would already be uninhabitable. So, yeah. And
there's something definitely with that, the Bikini Atoll explosions and like all that early testing. If you see the number of people that made it from being involved in that original nuclear testing to then making it into Hollywood or writing like books that get perpetuated through popular culture, it breaks any sort of logic of statistics. Like there's just an insane amount of people that went from being in the military in that part of the world and seeing unbelievable things and then having like these huge careers in entertainment.
Oh, it's just a coincidence.
Probably. Actually,
yeah,
probably,
no big deal. People still live in places with alleged nuclear fallout, but then we have they bring up the scrolls have front groups like such as Americans Against Russia, AAR. So, now we're getting into the whole homegrown terrorists thing. The irony is they're saying the Americans Against Russia are some kind of like patsy group being manipulated by the scrolls to bring about a big Grabbler World War thing. And that's exactly how it is in real life. All the anti-Russia propaganda being stirred up is all basically, public social engineering and manipulation for the most part. People that have a couple brain cells to rub together, they're like, yeah, I know a few Russians. They're very good at floors. Russians do my floors. They did a great job.
And AAR is a 119. It's totally a 9/11 right there.
Other AARs in the world, in military, that's the After Action Review. There's also the Aircraft Accident Report, the American Academy of Religion, and the Association of American Railroads.
Oh man, those are so fascinating to be on the same list. All of those, because we have was the railroad Tompkins versus railroad that gave us corporate personhood. It's the airplane crashing that gave us the Patriot Act. So many things in those acronyms you just listed. Some good.
Oh yeah, those were Barrick Pelagic says those were space cameras capable of withstanding 6 million degrees. It's so funny if you go back and watch the nuclear test film. Owen Benjamin was sharing this the other day, and it's like the little model house being blown away by a fan, but it's got the bum, 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 scary music, and, but the camera's fine. The camera's totally fine, but everything else is blown away. Super funny. Yeah. It's interesting. It's almost like right now and like this show, they're nostalgic for the time where they could trick people so easily with really low production value. It's like as the production value capabilities have gone up, it's become a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Well,
again, the intro, it feels like maybe someone just did it on like a long weekend. They didn't have to pay any union fees and stuff. But also this hits on, and I'm not going to go on a wild tangent here, but I just want to say how much this hurts to see the comic medium where if my one thing about comics that I like to kind of evangelize is that you can make the most outlandish thing without a CGI budget. Like typically it takes the same amount of time to draw a planet exploding and like 3D holograms and like crazy action scenes. Takes about the same amount of time to draw that as it would two people sitting at a table having a conversation. And there's almost no other medium in entertainment that lets you have that span of control over what's happening. And then like when we say you get these Marvel comic books, which have unlimited possibilities. But now we see it come to the screen and it's like, oh yeah, like everything's a conversation somewhere and the budget's fairly low and you don't get that cool part of comic books where anything can happen. Like, and you kind of get that sense as this goes on. You're like, okay, they probably don't have a huge budget where it's just going to nonstop be shape-shifting aliens and explosions like a comic book would be.
Yeah, that's that's what I love about comics too as a medium. It's full freedom of imagination and expression. And at most you need a minimum of one guy to make it. One guy could potentially do the whole thing. Maybe 3 or 5 people make a book more typically, but yeah, that's a really funny point. How almost like the perverse irony that as comic books are adapted into film, and then those things are lower budget. It's like missing the point of what makes comics so good in the first place. So that budget is no object in that medium.
And you have to kind of match that, I do believe that. And that's where Doctor Strange, I think, really shines, because you can tell that there was a huge, budget for the CGI in that one.
Yeah, those movies are pretty good. We covered those. So then we have Gravik. He's trying to start a war with U.S. and Russia with a dirty bomb. Oh, Jesus. Just got to point out, there's a certain there's a certain word, grabbler, that gets associated with a certain group of people that manipulate and cause wars for profit. And if you allow the B switch with the letter V, as happens in a lot of languages, V to B, it's instead of grav, it's grab, grabbler, Gravik, grabbler. Just, thought that's fun. He says, and then Talos is saying, if Gravik gets his way, your species will cease to exist. That's code for eliminate the goy.
The Georgia Goy destinies.
And then, of course, we got to get in the whole racism plug, right? Got to imply that the Russians are racist. How dare them? Terrible. Because Taylor says, Fury, you're going for a walk in Moscow at night?
Yeah.
Looking like you. You should have said, I'll be fine. No one will even be able to see me. I'm wearing all black.
Also, dude, I'm Nick fucking Fury. Like, who the hell are you talking to right now?
Right. Great point. That is such a great point, Thomas. Yeah. They really go out of their way to drive that home. There's no black people in Russia, or Russia is extra super racist.
There is now. There's one. But they've never seen him before, so it's like the Santa Maria pulling up on the shores, right? And Indians can't see it.
One thing I didn't mention is how Nick Fury, being played by Samuel L. Jackson, is kind of like an art imitate life and imitate art type of thing. Because in the comics, not the first and original, 616 main Marvel universe Nick Fury, he's a white guy. But the Ultimate Comics, which honestly the MCU pulls as much from Ultimate Comics, that set like parallel universe, that other imprint that Marvel does, where we get like Miles Morales as Spider-Man, for example. The Ultimate Comics universe has a Nick Fury intentionally, going back to the 2000 when the imprint launched, intentionally drawn to resemble Nick Fury or Sam Jackson. So I think like the main thing that we really want out of this show is him yelling and threatening people who are tied up in a chair while waving a gun. And we get a little bit of that, but I feel like we could have had more.
24 with a little bit more CGI.
Yes.
When I was young, I so loved that show. I wanted to be Jack Bauer. But it's important to imply the Russians are racist. That we have that laid out.
Well, there's nothing more nostalgic than some old Cold War sentiments.
And so here we have, do you guys see what's on the table?
I mean, I'm going to assume Russian vodka, but is that what you're pointing out?
Vodka.
Maybe I didn't get the best screenshot, but solitaire. This is cards laid out in solitaire.
Okay.
Again.
Okay.
So here we have it again. The truthers are playing solitaire. The truthers are isolated. That's part of the plan. All according to the plan. Then we have shot over to the White House. We got a scene with Rhodey and the president, Joe Biden, or President Ritson. his name is Ritson. Find that interesting. You know, the priestly Rit.
And he's
We
got the
see-
white. He's rocking white hair, kind of little Biden-esque.
Yeah, and we have hidden hand guy behind him. That's fun. And the painting on the right.
Is it like Grant?
Now we have just a few shots of Fury going on his walk, getting dirty looks from the racist Russians. Terrible people. Then we have he runs into a girl playing with a child playing with a rainbow ball. So, you know,
Which is remarkably clean for playing with it on the street. But that yellow is like they just got it out of the store.
we can't look at rainbow without thinking gay. And now it's a ball. So, you know, it just makes me think space is fake and gay. And but this girl is playing with the ball and the gay ball while her mother is too concerned with racism to care about the fact that their child is being indoctrinated by fake and gay stuff. That's just
Right.
that's my read on this.
Let alone that there's a kid chasing a ball in the street at night. Like there's so much cognitive dissonance cooked into this one little aspect of his night walk. It's hilarious.
It doesn't make any sense.
I also like that she needs supervision to play with this ball. Like, you need an adult to be around. If you're playing with a ball, you have to have an adult there.
That's right. Because there were lurkers looking to bag somebody. Luckily, there was a black guy coming through to foot the bill, so they didn't bag the child and they bagged the black guy instead.
And this is PK. This is the same girl Nick chases down later in the bomb scene, and she's still got her gay ball.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly. It's a distraction. You know, it's a fake and gay mainstream distraction. Racism and the ball and all of this. Dylan, heliosexuality rots culture.
I love heliosexuality. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to describe the whole ball model. Beautiful. And yeah, we see this girl in her rainbow ball later, which is bizarre. Like they really wanted us to see it. And yes, he gets bagged by the secret agents. Totally. The bagmen grab the black man, and this is a good scene. He gets the bag taken off his eyes, and here he is being confronted by this woman in red, and she says, a large black man in Moscow could either be Nick Fury or the ghost of Paul Robeson. Have you guys heard of Paul Robeson before? I had to look him up.
I had to look him up too.
Gabe, do you want me to take this or you?
Well, you go ahead. But it just felt like we were being led down a rabbit hole, quite by design.
So Paul Robeson was a bass baritone concert artist, an actor, a professional football player, and an activist. Wow. Very accomplished. I'm looking, just reading this from the Wikipedia. But I won't go through all of it, but basically his political activities had to do with just extreme leftist type of thing. And he was scrutinized by the FBI. He's on the watch list of subversives. He was investigated during McCarthyism, and he refused to recant his left-wing beliefs. So his passport was denied, and he couldn't leave the country anymore. And so he couldn't really make the income he used to make. And then in 1958, his right to travel was restored after the Supreme Court decision Kent versus Dulles. So
is that Dulles as in like Alan Dulles as in CIA?
I am pretty sure. Yeah.
I think it was. Yeah.
Who else would it be?
Yeah,
The
I remember
the lizards pop their head up again.
Oh wow, man!
totally.
This case is interesting. It went this case. They went all the way back to the fucking Magna Carta for her precedent on the right to travel.
Right, right. And
Whoa!
it actually some of the language that popped up. I'm glad you were digging on it again. Yeah, some of the language that popped up is they actually talk about his substantive rights. And I, yeah, and the fact that they use substantive rights
100%.
is 100% important. Yeah, it's telling us that it's going back to very old common law, uh, uh, rights and writs.
I'll just say that if anything, bringing up this character Paul Robeson is a nod to probably a nod to the fact that the black population has been weaponized against itself and almost become like a doomsday weapon against itself, as have women, as have every other group that would be a so-called minority by the radical left agenda.
Right. And the Old Man River song, I actually watched the recording of it today, the modern day, and it's about Mississippi. It's a song about the Mississippi, and talks about how the Mississippi brings different goods and services seasonally. But the Mississippi is that's actually the 7 rivers of the land extended territories of Egypt. So that's kind of what that was nodding to in some of my works is that Mississippi is let me think of Isaiah 11:15. I'm pretty sure is where you'll find the talking about the rivers of Egypt drying up, 7 rivers, and that's absolutely Mississippi.
There's good stuff in Dylan Sakosio's Spirit World series regarding the Nile being Christ or Krishna, and like the Nile like that these savior archetypes are symbolic of the river that inundates annually and yada yada.
That's
so
cool.
She's hoping for a command. She says to Fury, I was hoping for a command performance of Old Man River. Granted that we've already seen the savior archetype with him, coming down in a beam of light. He's very much the Bacchus figure. I mean, Krishna means black. That word means black or swarthy. So, we're potentially getting a nod to that. It's there, I think. And what did you think about this line? So did you just have me extraordinarily renditioned by a group of your thugs?
Isn't that basically what they're trying to do to Julian Assange? They're trying to extraordinarily rendition him because he's not even a American citizen. He does not belong to us, and we're trying to go into another country and swoop him out for our designs. Yeah, it was all very Julian Assange-esque as far as I could tell.
Oh yeah, like he's kind of the first or one of the first public enemy number 1 quote unquote truthers. This character in the red, her name is Sonia. Important to note, Sonia is a Ukrainian or Russian name meaning, you know what it means? Wisdom.
Oh, wow. It's basically Sophia.
It's the same as Sophia. Yeah.
And she's kind of like the head of intelligence in this context.
Ding, ding, ding.
Wowzers. Okay, well.
The head and the wisdom thing, it keeps coming back over and over again in this show.
It totally does. And she's wearing the red. So she is the res. She's 100% the res. She's also going to be, this is kind of fun, but she's also going to be Mephistopheles in a couple interesting ways. But Mephistopheles dresses in red. like this brilliant color red in a couple times, and they play with that in the story of Faust. So there's something of that going on too with wheeling and dealing with his soul.
Hold on a second. My computer's getting too hot. I need to crack my door. Be right back.
And one thing that'll be, I think it comes up in the next couple screenshots, but just a footnote to bring up later is, she offers him a drink, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll take you up on that." He takes her up on a beverage, but then when she pours it and hands it to him, he's like, he's a little taken aback by the fact that it's not the high end, the good stuff, the nice beverage. And she says something about, cutting corners. That comes up later. And that's something I've been paying attention to is formalities around drinking or formalities around dinner practices, just these little cultural nuances, because there's something that comes up later in the Krill camp that's just a fascinating contrast to that.
I just grabbed this screenshot because look at this crazy Kyborium behind Fury here.
Yeah, man.
There's some wild stuff in her room. A lot of owls and white flowers and clocks and horses.
And that clock over his right shoulder that's we're seeing to the left, it reminds me of one of those old death clocks that they used to make with, I guess, like obscene amounts of like toxic, fumes that would kill people as they made them.
I just Googled death clock, and apparently you can get yourself an NFT that counts down how long you have until you die.
I like that.
Death clock. Okay, so anyway, Kyborium is the why I brought up the Kyborium. I realize I'm maybe just glossing over that. The Kyborium is a word that refers to two things. First of all, in the Cancer associated card, the Chariot, if you look at that card, probably everybody's familiar with it, but yeah, I won't bother pulling it up. But look up the Chariot card if you don't know what I'm talking about. You have these 4 posts and an covering over the top of the Chariot rider. That's the Cancer sign. We're in Cancer right now, and when the show comes out, that 4-posted thing with the overhead of stars is called a Kyborium. Now, in a church or temple, this Kyborium 4-posted thing would be in the front of the church, and then often there would be some kind of a vessel or a grail, if you will, some kind of receptacle for the wine, and that's called a Kyborium as well. So I think that this thing behind him looks a lot like a very ornate version of that. Yes. And there appears to be some kind of Aphrodite figure on the front of it.
Yeah, and it'll have to do with like covering, and also it'll be like insurance. Like, if it's insured, then it's covered by this agreement. It'll have to do with covenants, and also it has to do with government. Even the word kybernetes is, I think, the Greek word for government or governor.
That makes sense because she's the head of things. Kybernetics, yeah, that's like the steersman. So kind of showing how words for, well, even Kyber and Gover are basically philologically related words. G and C switching, V and B switching, cyber, Gover. See what I mean? I mean, vowels pretty much interchange easily. That's no stretch at all. So yeah, cyber and Gover are words that are related. Then we have him looking at the clocks. Do you have some sort of clock fetish you've been hiding from me? This is profound because she basically explains to him that when the old head of MI6 retires, then they put a new clock on the wall. So this is talking about how, this is like, in my opinion, a reference to the incarnations of the savior deity or archetype, that a new cycle of time begins and ends with the whoever the next top of the totem pole is coming in and out, in terms of like who the savior deity is.
Yeah,
Any
it almost
thoughts on clocks?
it makes me think that they're actually referencing an actual historical MI6 member. And yeah, and the fact that they're keeping trophies on people's on people's how much life they have left. And also another thing, I mean, so many thoughts come to mind, but I also consider jobs in the government that are designated for life, for the entirety of your life. This kind of, it just kind of hits on a certain level when I learned like that all of the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States of the United States, that they are all in there for their entire lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
To the extent that that their death is like is a building up of anticipation. It has ceremonial or ritualistic potentiality. And I have a whole thing about how Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she died on the most perfect day for her, spiritually speaking. She got to die on her choice day of the whole year. That's the day she would have picked. And the same thing for Justice Scalia, Antonin Scalia. He died on Lupercalia, the day of the hunt. He's the secret society of the Brotherhood that venerates that sacred day, and that's the day he gets to die on.
King Kill, right? This is the transfer of energy at the most astrologically aligned time. It's
yes.
Textbook magic.
Yes, and the fact that their entire life is just built up in anticipation for that one event is so significant. So yeah, any position in the government that is there for your lifetime is definitely going to be harvested and utilized to the utmost.
Now, I don't want to fall into the trap of dehumanizing or othering, right? But as a thought experiment, they're talking about, a couple of people are talking about Jinn in the chat. If there were a way that reptilians or shapeshifters could operate, as we talked about at the beginning, the way that is most feasible to me would be spiritual entities that could body snatch, and if we're dealing with that kind of a situation with, the example you just gave, in the King Kill 33 of it all, the perfect ritualistic synchronicity that seems to orchestrate beyond human capability a lot of media events. Go watch Gematrinator's YouTube channel and how by the numbers different events in media, be it a sporting event and then a celebrity death and then maybe the release of some movie or something, all will have these numerical synchronicities baked in. And in all three of those realms, just like we saw with Paul Robeson, they're all actors, really. The athletes, the politicians, the actual admitted actors. If there were some kind of Jinn body takeover going on with, say, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, would it be reasonable to think that the beings controlling that puppet could just sort of pull the plug on that biology on the appropriate day for a larger magical working that might be going on? Or there's also, in a less evil light, there's plenty of stories about, say, Buddhist monks that decide today's the day I'm leaving my body, and they just go into a meditation pose and they never come back out of it, and their body doesn't even decay properly, and it's sort of like self mummifies. So all that's in the mix too.
I feel like there's a practical example of this too, especially like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, where you don't need a reptilian or interdimensional entity to come into her body. She probably just has a handler that's like, you know, come on, grandma, we're gonna sign this now and check here, and just kind of like holds her hand and makes her sign it as they go. And I feel like that's kind of it's related to the king kill, because instead of you actually doing this big sacrificial act in the middle of, you know, Dealey Plaza and everyone seeing it, you're still transferring that energy and power onto like the new blood. It's just in a much more vampiric and maybe like retirement home sort of way, but you're still kind of like taking their agency and using their agency, and they become a proxy at a certain point. And that's kind of what King Kill 33 represents, is this proxy and this like cremation of care kind of ritual, because it's not the body of the person and it's not even their personality, it's their like energy, charisma, focus, attention that you're really transferring from one to the other. So even if you let Ruth Bader Ginsburg get super old, see how they kept making documentaries and putting her on shirts, and she was like woke and hip, and like everyone wanted to dress up and break dance and do TikTok dances as Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's almost like they're raising the stock so then they can be like, okay, sell, and that sell is like, okay, we're gonna sign these documents on our own now, we don't need you anymore. And so I don't know, I think it's like raising her stock of like getting the public, and you know, King Kill 33, baby. I feel like it's almost like a fact at this point.
Good points, man. And I can't. One of my favorite Dylan Secotio-isms is that, you know, the SCOTUS rite of Freemasonry. The Supreme Court of the United States is SCOTUS. I love that.
We also get a nice owl.
Oh, right.
Close up here. He puts the surveillance bug in the owl's eye. That's fun. Since we're dealing with Athena symbolism, Minerva symbolism, Pallas, Athena. Pallas is wisdom.
And that's kind of the moment that you realize that he was getting taken in by design. That this is all playing into his plan all along.
Yeah. He says, or she says, a clock goes up when your time in the circus is done. Well, circus is a word that is interesting. It's more like kirke than it might seem, that the circus and the church are quite thematically linked. We'll say that. These lamps behind here are intense too. And then he says,
you could also say your time in the circle is done, or your time in the cycle is done.
Exactly. It's a cycle of time. Thank you. That's what I'm talking about. You know, even when speaking of the tiny hats, the derogatory word for them, which is kike, is a word that comes from circle.
Le Cercle. Yeah. Cecil Rhodes, you know, some of his hidden wills established Le Cercle. It's like they say that that's the secret society that ate all the other secret societies.
So then you see here too that what are they sitting on, Gabriel?
La sofa. he's reigning on the sofa.
Yep, the head, the ruler, the wise one gives orders from the sofa. That's old world shit. I think that's why. It's obvious that that's why Sophia, wisdom, and sofa share a root.
Mm-hmm.
As Gabriel says,
he's talking to Sophia here, isn't he?
Yeah. Her name is Sonia, which is the same meaning as Sophia, 100%. Right. She's the sovereign. She's the sovereign. But like, read this. He wants to kill it in its crib. That's interesting language coming from Old Man River, the old man time. You know, the previous epoch, the previous head of wisdom. You know, he's no longer really. He's kind of like the Kronos character, right? The next iteration, the next world the world has to die and be reborn for the next world to come about, and that's the scroll world theoretically. That's
Is
the
he
way things
eating
are
right
going.
here too? Is he eating something?
He's taking a shot of bad bourbon, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the cheap bourbon.
Because
But
you
the
said
whole killing in
Kronos,
its
and
crib
it's like
thing-
he's in that same pose as like going to eat one of his kids right here.
They had to do some like good clothing and camera angles, I think, to conceal the pounds that Sam is packed on. He's getting older, but maybe he ate a lot of babies. But he says kill in its crib. To me, that's like really symbolic of the next incarnation of the Savior typically has some kind of, flee from King Herod type situation. Hide you in the basket and float you down the river, etc. There's a danger of being killed in your crib if you're the next round of humanity.
And what's that? And that's like Moses and Mises and Sargon of Akkad or whatever, all have that exact same story, right? Of the baby being put into the basket and whisked away from the evil ruler that then, knows that this baby's the one that's going to come back and like rise against him. So he sends all those people across the plains and everything. Another like really strong archetype.
Yeah. It's part of the system. It's a requirement to the system. And then he's talking about the old Nick Fury. She says the Thanos' snap changed you. No matter how hard you fight, there's always someone stronger to undermine you. But I just thought old Nick, that's a word for the devil. And that's Kronos. That's the old man. That's classic. He's old Nick. And then this thing's been floating around in the back of the scene the whole time, but it's a head. Like a goddess head bust thing. That's just on theme. Don't forget scroll is basically the word skull.
Yeah.
And then we get to cut to the scene of visiting for the first time the secret hideout of the terrorist scrolls, 312 kilometers southwest of Moscow. So I was curious, what's 312 in miles? And it turns out it's 193 miles. Well, then that really piqued my interest, guys, because 193 is the days left in the year from the date of release of the show. Remember, it starts with present day, so that's 6/21. June 21st leaves 193 days in the year. So we have 193 showing up again. It's a clue to us that 193 is important. It's first thing that came to mind is that it's the 44th prime. And it kind of tripped me out because this was the 44th line of my notes because I have them bullet pointed and then bullet points are numbered. And I got to this on number 44 and 193 is the 44th prime. And I was like, okay, there's something to this. Let's dig deeper.
Wow.
And you drove to the gas station and bought a scratch off, right?
I did not. I guess that would have been the right thing.
That would have been it. That's when you get the 7/7 sort of scratch off because all the planets have aligned.
So, Gabe, what did you come up with on 193 before I share some of the other things on it? 193 days left in the year when this came out.
Yeah.
And we're 193 miles from Moscow.
Yeah, man. Well, 193 will be ARK, or excuse me, ARC, and just your ordinal reduced. So it's an arc.
And arche means wisdom, and it means head in Greek. Wisdom and head, arc.
Yep, and we're at the crown of the Analima as we go through the solstice as well. So yeah, all those things having to do with the pinnacle.
I was blessed with a share from PK, who's in the chat right now. He sent me this book about Kabbalistic gematria. And so we have some of the things that 193 equaled according to this book first of all was the I didn't transcribe what Hebrew letters these are. I think it's like I'm sorry. If you want to know the exact Hebrew letters, I'll make sure and forward this to the InnerVerse chat. But it's, I think, something Zayin Lamed. Anyway, so what the first word means, master of knowledge. It's the title of a Rosicrucian grade. It's one proficient in the sphere of Hod. So the master, so 193 is a Kabbalistic number for the master of knowledge. That sounds very much like the spy master. And there's also the Hebrew letter Zayin, spelled in full, is Zayin Yod Nun, which has a numerical value in Gematria of 193. And then there's moral philosophy, Philosophia Moralis, apparently equals 193. And or this is something related to the Zayin. I'm not 100% sure what this book's trying to say. But
and then just the most obvious breakdown too, but of course the word philosophy meaning philosophia, the love of knowledge.
Yeah, love of wisdom, love of Sophia. And then another thing they reference to this value of the letter name Zayin spelled in full was the Fratres Aurae Crucis, the Brothers of the Golden Cross. All persons who really fulfill the ideals of the grade of Practicus are entitled to be so called, Brothers of the Golden Cross. And it is partly on this account that these ideas are associated with the solar of golden crosses of 13 squares associated with their grade. So, okay, that's where I need to bring this up. One of the things that we haven't really mentioned yet is at about the same time this show comes out, we have the Wagner Group situation going on with Russia and the Ukraine. I didn't know much about this other than the whispers you hear on the headlines you see. I didn't really look into it until today. But the Wagner Group is apparently a private military organization that attempted some kind of coup in Russia about when this show comes out. So it's almost like the delay of the show coming out on the solstice as it did wasn't really a delay. Maybe, maybe it was right on time. I'm not sure. But this is the logo of the Wagner Group. Does this look like a golden cross? Brotherhood of the Golden Cross? We have cross swords here. I think that's in the mix, man. Because what are these scrolls doing in Russia? They are trying to form a coup, in a sense, to cause a war with the West. And so, I mean, we're thematically, it's the same shit going on in the show and in supposed real life.
Yeah,
and I've also found, do you guys remember during, I don't know, it's a couple of years ago, there was all this, like, during cooties, there were these military vehicles with the big Z on them.
The Asimovs?
Is that an Asimov thing?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Well, remember, 7 is Zayin. Zayin spelled out is 193 in Hebrew Gematria.
Ooh, nice. Good one. That's a good one.
And the alternative logo for the Wagner Group is apparently, let me just pull it back up. You see this Z?
Big fat Z.
Big red Z.
Look
Z
at
is
that.
the third glyph in the Russian alphabet, according to people that told me this. that would make it three. Yeah. So the big Z, the big Zayin, the 193. There's something here. I'm sure we're just scratching the surface of what is really being put across Kabbalistically.
So, man, I got it. It's just too close. It's too close for me not to say anything. But long story short, I've discovered that Socrates is encoding the Cancer constellation in 100,000 million different ways. Over on the Slick Dissident channel, very recently. I did a fun little correspondence of the scene that is the painting of his last moment, where he's reaching for the cup of hemlock and he's about to drink the poison, the socially mandated poison, and he's pointing to the sky and he's saying his last words before he takes that drink. And long story short, all of the details of the scene in the painting are zodiacal constellations. And Socrates is Cancer. His anatomically, like his arm is the constellation Cancer. His knees and his hips line up with Cancer. It just fits right on his body. But this is also I am finding that he is revealing the donkey god, the Set, the god Set. And so his name in reverse, Socrates' name in reverse, is the Set Arcos. And there's something really fascinating going on around this potentially worshiping a donkey covertly, not on the public level, like secretly worshiping donkeys. And the reason why this really fascinates me is because in Capoeira, we have certain rituals and ceremonies that are designed to emulate the donkey mating rituals. So I actually have some experience in honoring these animal totems ritualistically, and it's kind of blowing my mind to find out that that these philosophers that are also keeping these secrets of these archons of the heavens alive. So yeah, Set has been on my radar, and I'm not seeing him as just a donkey anymore. I'm starting to see him as a zebra specifically. I had to bring it around to the Z, because the zebra in the camouflage, also the aspect of being a chimera or mixed genetics, being a hybrid, all of these things are really just kind of pulling my attention forward. So I thought I would mention that Set, the donkey-headed god, may not just be any donkey, he might be a zebra.
You mentioned, this is a little bit crazy tangent, but you mentioned the mating ritual of donkeys, and this is actually something that's kind of interesting, that donkeys are fairly unique compared to horses and zebras, because they have their own hierarchical social system, where horses and zebras in particular, they have what you would call like a harem system, which works exactly as you would imagine. It's like the top dog gets all the girls, which is something that's very unique about horses and zebras that does not apply to donkeys, because like they're like, I guess, more like individualistic, you could say.
That is very interesting. I like that.
We know this traveling ancient priest class had a lot of horse symbolism, has always been in the mix, deeply so. Through Gematria, Equus being the same as Jesus, 27, and Mercury, 27. And then the symbolism of the ship and navigation being represented by horses. And also, it makes sense too that I never heard about this harem thing that horses do, but it's very appropriate to the priest kings of old. That's for sure. I also, on the 193 tip, I brought up a website to check out where in the Bible are there any words that equal 193 in the Hebrew Bible. And there are only two, actually. The first was a word that meant the arrow snake. And an arrow snake is evidently so called from how it darts and springs on its prey in the manner of a rattlesnake. The Hebrew root from which the name is derived seems to be related to an Arabic root meaning jump or leap. The arrow snake is mentioned in the prophecy of Isaiah as one of the creatures to inhabit the land of the Edomites. So there's that. And also, I think when you say arrow snake, I just can't help but think of Eros. You know, Eros, like the savior deity, and an arrow with a snake wrapped around it, and not just a tramp stamp from the early 2000s. Like that's a caduceus type of symbol for sure. But then the only other thing that was in the Hebrew Bible that equaled 193 in Gematria is a word that meant the object of attack, the mark to be attacked. And dude, where is this 193 showing up in the show? Just right here. Their object of attack, 312 kilometers southwest of Moscow. Obviously Russia's in the crosshairs right now.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty fascinating.
PK in the chat says, I heard yesterday on a show about this Golden Cross Brotherhood, and the guy was saying they were involved in the American Civil War, like not in a good way.
Oh, I know who. I know what he's talking
Interesting
about.
in context to the
Wasn't that
Russian
was Knights of the Golden Cross, who John Wilkes Booth, I think, was apparently part of, wasn't it? Or
Yes.
do I have that wrong?
No, you're totally spot on. Yes, totally. There's Booth, popping up out of that booth. Definitely brings the Buotes, the sacred void, the great void of Virgo, to mind. But yeah, that was on I think New York Patriot was doing a weave, having a lot to do with the Golden Brotherhood. Oh, and you know what else about the swords, the crossed swords? That hails back to and a rebellion, this Wagner rebellion. That hails back to the line in the Bible where Jesus tells them that they'll have to sell their cloak to buy a sword, and that is that he required that they had 2 swords to spark off that rebellion. And so I just think that it's interesting that very famous line is intrinsic to that group with their logo of crossed swords.
Good stuff. There's probably a much deeper there.
Yeah, I think that even goes back to Sancta Sadis and the Unum Sanctum. The foundation of Unum Sanctum is based on that sell your cloak to buy a sword parable.
Now we see this guy coming up to the Skrull coming up to the gates of the Skrull community. Interesting that on the back of their jacket is homo backwards. And he says what he wants is to be at home in his own skin.
Right.
And his name is Beto, just basically like beta. All of that just, it's there. Make of it what you will. Then we meet Gaia, whose name is the same as an old name for the Earth, which also, besides being Gaia, was called gay. And on the back of their jackets is homo. I'm just saying it's there. And her first line is, take your natural form.
Yeah, then that's the line where he says he just wants it to be home in his own skin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Home in my own skin.
And he's got the checkerboard,
he doesn't want to be in the closet.
Right. And he's wearing his checkerboard hoodie, which it never ceases to amaze me how it will always indicate a point of exchange. Like they exchange password, pleasantries, whatever. You got to say the right word to come into the base. So he's going from the wilderness into the public, into the populace. But there's always a checkerboard, that point of exchange. It's very fascinating. And then when she serves him up that plant, she's being like extremely hospitable. She's brought like a fruit from the motherland that has actually survived. It even went through mutation to survive here in the earthly climates. And she's going above and beyond just to give him a taste of home. And I think this find to be kind of I don't know. I would say cunningly. I'm not really sure if this is intentional or not. I can't tell, but it's very cunning if it is intentional. And that is that the rebels are being depicted as having like very selfless, heart-centered tradition around exchange of food. That she gives him the one taste of home, and he's eating it. He's like, sucking on the fruit of the motherland. Whereas with Samuel L. Jackson, Nick Fury, when he's getting this shot of whiskey from his fellow spy, she's giving him like the bottom of the barrel whiskey, not the good stuff. You know what I mean? And she doesn't care what he thinks about it. So there's just something strongly contrasted in their traditions around food.
I thought we also ought to point out that if these are the terrorist scrolls, these are the radical ones, they grow their own produce. We're identifying the radical with the homesteader here.
Good call.
I feel like that's definitely been going on lately. And here we get the nice overhead shot of the not so desolate nuclear wasteland. No? It looks pretty good.
Springfield.
I live in Springfield, the Springfield, the Simpsons one. We have
have they actually claimed a specific one? Because I think
all I'm saying is we have a Lake Springfield and there's a nuclear power plant on the lake.
Okay. Do you have a Blinky though? That's the real question.
I've never gone looking. It's a big ass lake. Maybe. The three-eyed fish is Blinky, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Just saying. I mean, we got the right kind of donuts and everything. We could be the Springfield. But anyway, the point here is that this does not look like a desolate nuclear wasteland to me. Neither does any area that is so-called fallout. Other than that the buildings are all decayed. But, to me, this whole thing is like a reveal of nukes aren't really what you're taught to believe, but we got everyone doing duck and cover enough times that it's generationally hardwired in as a fear, and your cognitive dissonance will take care of removing your ability to perceive what's right in front of your eyes with that. Just remember, like Fukushima, guys, Fukushima. OMG, we're all going to die. I never died. I've literally never died.
And they even, when they pull out the map of all the scroll headquarters, and they say that, because they're not subject to radiation poisoning, it almost is like a big reveal on what a amazing real estate boon that radiation could be. What kind of fraud and scam they probably can run under the cover of radiation.
So Cody just brought up 193 AD is the year of the 5 emperors, in which there were 5 claimants for the title of Roman emperor. It started a period of civil war where multiple rulers vied for the chance to be Caesar. I almost brought that up. I wanted to bring that up in the point where the opening scene where he's like 5 different groups, 5 different attacks, all the same shit. Because I was thinking year of the 5 emperors, 5 different wannabe leaders, that there's probably something there.
Yeah, that is something. Wow.
Some Royal Rumble going on there.
Yeah, good one, Decoded.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us of that. Everyone else stays in the compound, she tells them, except for the soldiers. Compound is a pretty charged word. I'll just say that. It's a charged word. These guys, being that they're green, it's it's eco-terrorism. It's the green agenda.
I think there was a branch of Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria. There was one branch they were all shut-ins. They weren't allowed to leave. It's probably where all the eunuchs were hanging out. You just assumed they were eunuchs and there was nothing to do.
Or maybe they were just a bunch of malakas.
I'm happy to know that word now. Call people that. So in this scene, we get taken into the secret back room in the scroll compound where they keep their shells. PK, thank you for letting us know that they call the Sephiroth of the Clipothic tree shells. That is the underside or the evil twin of the Kabbalistic tree of life. Shells. And so to me, this looks a lot like big data mining operations. It's pretty much big data mining. And with big data mining, identity theft becomes easier. You can simulate someone's behavior online pretty easy. Not to mention how AI can impersonate someone's look and make video that looks like them and voice.
When big data is how AI works at all. It's just by absorbing and learning from everything possible.
Go on.
Well, I mean, because so AI basically, it's not even like we have to tell it what to do. You just give it an infinite amount of information, and it'll start detecting its own patterns. So it's at a certain point, the original concept of data mining is like we want to find out information about these specific things. But once there's almost like this singularity crossover where the AI doesn't even need for humans to tell it what kind of category of information it's looking for. It's just finding patterns and relationships and, you know, correlations between things that far surpass what like human correlations would be, because we can only correlate things that exist in our plane of existence and go back to our own personal lived experiences. But when you've got this big data, you know, like warehouse and everything connected to one big network, they're all learning from things that are not limited to the same meat space concepts that we are.
Right. Like the market value price of cod oil correlated to, like in France, correlated to the amount of roadkill on a stretch of highway in Oregon.
Right, and therefore the next Tuesday after a heavy rain in Wyoming is the best day to like buy, you know what I mean? Like they find these things that to us it's like, oh, those things are completely arbitrary, they don't actually link, but there might actually be a pattern there that it's detecting. I don't think we've gotten there yet, but I think that's where that singularity happens, and it's like we won't realize that it's got there. It'll just be like, oh wow, this computer keeps getting all kinds of like things right. And it's like, well, actually it just found the cheat code, and now you just turned into like a real life game genie.
Totally, dude. It's basically an alchemical wedding where the rational and the irrational become one. I never thought about it that way, but it seems like that's kind of what's going on there. So they're calling the people shells. This guy's name, who is in charge of the shell operation, is Pagan. So there's that. Pagan's a character from the comics, I recall. I think Pagan impersonated Elektra, if that matters ever in the comics. I doubt that Elektra will come up in this because she doesn't exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the guy that they're bringing a shell to, he's impersonating one of these Americans against Russia. So that's a plot point. Then we fast forward to meeting Gravik. And basically Pagan's telling him he is the cause. And Gravik says, no, the cause is to find our home, or to take Earth as their home. Then we fast forward a little further, and here's a scene where we see Gaia out and about in town. Why I grab screenshots here is because you see this bull in the back left here behind her.
Uh-huh.
So there's a bull there. And then two more shots. I only have screenshots of two of the times, but there's basically three times we see Gaia in front of a bull symbol. To me, that's underpinning or foreshadowing that she's going to be sacrificed.
I don't recognize this particular scene, but is that like meat he's got slung over his shoulder there?
Probably. I think that this is a sacrifice symbolism, though, because, spoiler alert, later on. And with the old system of priestcraft, you pretty much needed a sacrificial bull to do anything.
That was the
Especially
old tax system, man. That because you would bring your sacrifice to the priests, and then the priests would divvy it up amongst themselves, and then they would take little bits of penance and when they would say they would go and like sacrifice this to the fire. Well, the priests were eating that barbecue after the sacrifice. It wasn't like they just throw it into the fire and then it's gone and it's ash. Like you were making this sacrifice as in like, hey, priests, keep doing your thing. You guys are doing a good thing. Here's like a quarter of a goat or whatever.
And she was on her way, I think, in this scene to go meet the bullshit art dealer. And yeah, here he is. So this is a good reveal, actually. This guy is up front. He's an art dealer with terrible art, just atrociously god awful. And as is classic intelligence agency modus operandi, the art dealer is actually a front for contraband items and money laundering and God knows what else, weapons. That's the whole art. Isn't that like the whole Hunter Biden narrative?
The whole art world narrative, yeah.
Yeah, but here we are in Russia, so this is
not enough
Hunter
crack.
Biden.
There's not enough crack here, though.
Then Fury shows up to interrogate this guy, and this is where we finally get a good Samuel L. Jackson waving a gun and threatening somebody, as we wanted the whole time. It's really the only thing we wanted. Do you see the head, the female head to the left of him with the curly hair, like the Buddhic hairstyle? It's the head of wisdom. We're still seeing that pop up.
Could even be like a Gorgon if you wanted to really read into it.
Could be. I thought this was funny. He's sitting in a chair, and this guy's like, "That chair belonged to Louis the 15th. It's priceless." So I found a painting with Louis the 14th and a chair, and it's him as a young boy being picked up by Tsar Peter the Great of Russia. And the funny thing about the legend of Peter the Great coming to France and instructing the young king, that there's a lot of like embracing and kissing and lifting up the young boy before you take him on horseback rides and whatever, going on hunts.
I'm going to show you how to be a real man.
Looks like a Joe Pesci caveman. It's good. And then, classic power move. Fury's like, I'm going to get the name wrong. Intentionally. It's like, you got any more of these comfortable ass Louis the 14th chairs? Even though it was Louis the 15th. But Louis the 14th, he's the famous one. Louis the 14th is the Sun King. Classic. Here he is portrayed as Jupiter. And there he is portrayed as a young child. Really looks like a girl. Louis the 14th. If the transpocalypse has been going on for a long time. At least 400 years, apparently. Maybe a homunculus.
Isn't one of those Louis is the one that St. Louis is named after?
Probably the Sun King.
Yeah. And I think that's going to also kind of hail back to that Mississippi thing.
Oh, it's Louis the 9th, apparently.
Oh, okay. Thought we had a Mississippi St. Louis tie-in.
Well, it's in the line of Louis. They're all related, right?
I also have to just call bullshit really quick because there's no chance that there's a single chair made in the time of King Louis the 14th or any King Louis that would be as comfortable as like a nice modern, I don't want to say lazy boy because they're kind of like garbage now, but you know what I mean? Like that's not going to be a comfortable ass chair. Come on.
There's
come on,
no
guys.
way. No, it's like for some reason they want us thinking about Louis the 14th or the 15th. I think it might be because of this Russia-France connection in that era, but I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. You know, no, that's a very good point. Friedrich Nietzsche had like this brilliant one paragraph that he wrote that was talking about like if I was Germany and I knew that um, my one of my biggest fears would be France and Russia getting along, then I would spend all of my energy making sure that France and Russia remain enemies forever. So yeah, I think you're right. I think they're kind of playing on these old political allegiances that are getting drummed up in modern day events. But this guy kind of makes me think of the Bankman Friedman or whatever scandal.
The haircut, he's got a little like a Mr. Cotter thing going on too, if you want to play that.
All right, yeah, that's kind of what came to mind a little bit with this guy. Nice.
Now,
Oh, yeah.
we won't be covering in as close detail the latter parts of this episode unless you guys have stuff to bring up specifically. Because in the second half, it's more action, less overt symbolism or noticeable symbolism.
Yeah.
And we've been at it for a while. But we're skipping over a scene where Talos meets with Gaia. She's got the bomb. Somebody set up us the bomb. And he's like, yo, the guy you're working for killed your mom. Your mom's dead. And so she's kind of shocked and saddened. Now she's primed to be a double agent in the following episodes. Then I found it interesting, though, that then Fury meets with Maria Hill in the tavern. He buys a round of vodka, speaking in Russian. He says that's basically something along the lines of that's how intelligence agents have been keeping Cold Wars from going hot, is by knowing who to buy a drink for. I don't understand that, but Maria Hill is a character we haven't talked about much. She's not that big of a character at any point in the Marvel universe. She's just always kind of like a prop character. She's also an Ultimate Comics character, so her version in the comic books is related to the version of Nick Fury that is based on Sam Jackson. I'm sure that the Marvel is stoked to get Samuel L. Jackson to play the character that they drew to look like him in the comics before. So what Maria Hill as a name to me that it invokes, she's created, I'll just say, she was created by a comics artist, including this version of Fury, the Sam Jackson version of Fury, created by a comic book writer named Brian Michael Bendis. He was the architect of the whole Marvel Ultimate Universe. He is also a J. So there's likely some Kabbalism intentionally. Not that, it's not outside of the realm of possibility. Neither good nor bad, just pointing it out. Maria Hill, well, if we're dealing with Fury being a savior archetype, Mary that name is important. Hill is where you would have the church in the old religion. The top of the hill would usually be where the circle or the kirke was at.
Uh-huh.
So that's in the mix. Her name has some importance. Yeah. He says, if you drop the M, her name is Hill of Aries. Yeah, interesting. Aria Hill. Areopagus is the word for the Hill of Aries. That's a Roman thing. So your halo is spinning, Gabriel. But I find it interesting. They have a tradition, apparently, Fury and Maria, of telling the truth to each other while playing chess. She's the white, he's the black. Get it?
Right. They did. There's like a whole rapid fire of like strange kind of race baity stuff going on right here. Like, Fury, he orders bourbon, and the Russian guy takes the vodka. So Fury's got the brown, and the Russian guy's got the clear. Fury drinks out of a brown bottle, and she's got a green bottle. Nice. She's
he ordered a Schlitz 42, I think.
Yes. And then the fact that she's playing the white pieces and he's the black pieces. Oh, and I think the line that he says is something like, "That's how we kept the Cold War from going hot." I think he says something like, "Spooks like me buying drinks." And she's like, "Yeah, you can't say spooks like that." And he's like, "No, you can't say spooks." So there's like all this.
Is there something racial about spook?
There is. Yeah,
I did not know that.
Oh, I derogatory term.
Yes.
But it also means like obviously like an undercover CIA agent or something.
Right. And I think it's taken on more of the. I think it means. I think it means spy today more than
it does.
I think it lost that old racial thing over time. It's lost that connotation, because when I hear spook, I strictly think of spy. I do not think of it.
The CIA took that word back.
They reappropriated it. Yes. Isn't that weird? And then
whoa, spooky.
I know. See, there's so many things that like the kids aren't going to learn, and they're just going to stumble into. Like, I learned from my buddy who was from Alabama. He's from the South. I learned a lot of things from him. Like, I had a cat that we named the cat Mammy. And I was like, yeah, my cat's name was Mammy because she had like, multiple batches of kitties, one after the other. And he's like, "No, man, you can't be saying Mammy." I'm like, "Why? What's wrong with Mammy? That's my cat's name." And he's like,
that's what got Aunt Jemima fired, bro.
Yeah, dude. He's like, "You can't say that." And every time I said it, he was like coughing on his own lung. He's like, "No, dude, shut up. You stop saying it." Yeah, there's a lot of terms like that like kind of means something to one side of the country and a whole other thing to the other side of the country.
It's crazy, man. I just had no idea. I thought spooky was a Halloween word. I was just looking into it a little bit, and apparently this might go back to World War II. So back into the World Wars mix, that the Tuskegee black athletes enlisted to the Air Force,
man,
deployed in Europe, were called the Spookwaff.
Wow.
Not officially, but like that was a derogatory thing. Huh.
Yeah, the German version of the derogatory version. Because just like everything else in World War II, the Germans were just copying American racism. They didn't even make that up on their own. They weren't even creative enough. All they are is like the industrious culture that takes someone else's idea and just we're going to crank that out assembly mode style, but like the ingenuity of racism and eugenics came right here, homegrown in America.
So we're scooting forward here, and the next thing that's happening is the big day is coming of the plot. They're meeting, or they're gonna blow up a Vas Soy Edinenie square.
This looks CGI too, the face.
Yeah, I did. I bumped up the exposure maybe a little too far, because for some reason when I screen capture off of on my computer, things are like way darker than they should be. So I have to bump it up in Photoshop.
I wonder about
that word in Russian, Vasoyadinenie, means reunification. I don't think that that's a real place.
Okay.
It's a fictional location.
Yeah, very alchemical though.
Then we see in this scene, we see a couple of characters come back, like the lady who gives him the dirty look. It turns out that's a scroll. He's trailing one scroll, trying to find who has the bomb. And we see the gay ball again.
Ball child.
It says bellow in white letters behind her head. Where is that, PK? I missed that. Bellow is possibly white. Have you heard of like Belarus? Belarus was Belarussia. It meant white Russia. It's where the dude is from. Drinking white Russians. Anyway. But but this scene's mostly just action. He's trailing the scroll through the crowd. He shapeshifting to different people. They blow it up. Here's your false flag bombing event. False flag bombing.
One thing I noticed right before the bomb goes off, it seems intentional. Again, we can't really say that they're doing this on purpose, but it seems intentional to me. The camera work is actually kind of setting up the viewer for cognitive dissonance. For example, there's like two characters they're like jumping on a teeter-totter, like the old teeter-totter gymnastic tricks. And the camera just happens to pan over the two acrobats as the one guy just launched off the screen, but he never comes back down. And then the camera cuts to another, angle. And it just seems to me that they're intentionally generating these unrealistic, illogical sequences for the onlooker before the actual action is happening. So I just saw a lot of like very subtle programming going on in the background, where it's like we're being almost entrained to accept things that are illogical, slowly but surely. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
you can't trust information.
All kinds of false flags, where if you scrutinize the footage and the news coverage, you're seeing all kinds of problems with it.
That's exactly it. Yes, it's as though we're being trained to expect to see what is what is CGI, what's bullshit. You know what I mean?
What it started out with: imagine a world where you can't trust information.
Right.
Yeah, and we're being. I think the training is to just disregard your senses and accept what you're told rather than what your senses show you.
Yes.
Hence, all of the rainbow ball. Senses don't support NASA cosmology at all. I can't believe I failed to point out, but with the whole Ross wisdom weave, Ross, it's right there in the word Russia. My bad.
Yeah.
Left that out. Good call.
The Russos.
So then Maria Hill gets capped by a scroll who looks like Fury. It's Gravik, actually. Disguised as Fury. Bum, bum, bum. And Finn. Then it's over. That's where it leaves off. Got to have a good cliffhanger.
And you got that little Russian flag at her toe. You see that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And she's even the same. She matches the color scheme of the flag.
They killed Saint Maria. Those dirty Ruskies.
Yep. Trippy.
So what do you guys think? You want to let us know in the chat, and then you two, I want to know. You guys want to continue this series? Do you want to decode further episodes?
I'm down to decode. I've seen episodes 2 and 3, and it doesn't necessarily pick up the pace a whole lot. There's lots of talking and conversations.
I agree. I think if we continued this, I kind of want to wait to see where it goes in episode 4 with the Super Scrolls.
Yeah.
But episode 3 is a pretty short one. So I kind of think if we continued this, we might be able to do, like, cram a quick stream in on and put 2 and 3 together.
Yeah,
the first episode's always going to have a lot of groundwork to cover off,
Mhm.
and then we can kind of just pick up in a part 2. PK claims episode 3 is juicy. Episode 2 introduces the interracial marriage. That's interesting. Interspecies marriage.
Oh, right. You're right.
So,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm totally. I agree with Thomas. I think it got kind of, they're slowing down the pace. It seems like they're going to spread things as thin as they can. So maybe we should stack them up as much as possible.
Yeah, I felt that way about the slowness from the beginning. But when I went back over this with a more fine-tooth comb, there was a lot of stuff hiding in the background, probably even more than I missed. But, like those decks of solitaire cards, the bull behind Gaia, the 193, the all the head and wisdom symbolism continually repeating it over and over again. So I think that we ought to we gotta get back together and do something.
Yeah,
well,
man,
I wanted to, because last time I talked to you, Chance, about this series, and I think you mentioned you've never seen Punisher Warzone, right?
Mm-mm.
I would love to suggest it, not because I even think it's a cult. I hope it is. I hope that we could pick it apart. But it is truly one of the more comic booky Marvel movies. And it's definitely not MCU, but it's a Marvel movie. So I don't know if it fits into the same theme, but that could be a fun one to pick apart.
Okay. Well,
I
we'll
guarantee
again.
no one's demystified Punisher Warzone. So
maybe we could do that on, maybe Thomas can run that show.
I'm down, bro. Let's definitely do that.
You've been doing some movie decodes.
We could do a
Disney
comic
stuff.
decode.
I mean, we're technically, you're on brand right now with all your Disney stuff you've been doing. This is technically Disney owned property that we're decoding today.
It builds into my growing theory, and I won't go on too much of it, but that Disney's they found the formula that works. Their algorithm that they found out works is that you sit a kid down in front of this fantastic world, you kill their parents through proxy, right? They're watching the movie and Simba's dad dies, or they get kidnapped, or whatever. Whatever happens is you separate the child from all of the sense of authority figures, and then you plop in this trademarked intellectual property character, and you're like, here's the new thing that you can trust. Here's the new dad. Here's your new mom. Here's your new authority figure. And then that becomes, like the Happy Meal toy. They have to have it because that Happy Meal toy has more authority than you do as a parent, because when you sat your kid down, Disney killed you and replaced you with, this little thing. And I feel that Disney purchasing Marvel and kind of doing the same thing with Marvel, it's kind of the exact same thing. But to me, Marvel superheroes is the closest thing that we have to, like pagan gods again. This is like children and adults worshiping these, ubermensches. And that's kind of like this new wave of, multi-god paganism. So by Disney owning that, and then also owning all these old grim fairy tales and folklore, they own all the old mythology and they own all the new mythology. Like there's nothing in between that's left that Disney doesn't say, I own that. So I don't know. I feel like they're really, like, they're winning the culture war if we're playing Civilization, right?
Well put. Very well put. Did I hear there was something about George Lucas was had a chance to get his hands back on his own property again?
I think they are removing some of the Star Wars rides from the Disney parks too. I don't know if that's directly related to that or not.
And George Lucas is kind of coming back on the scene, right? Is that the rumors?
I don't fucking care about Star Wars, so I fucking couldn't care less, dude.
Yeah, I heard that Lucas had a chance to buy his own stuff back.
Huh.
think it'd be interesting to see them try to backtrack from all the shit that they've dug. It'll be really interesting just to see if they try to backtrack.
Well, I still think Hans shot first, and I think it's bullshit that they even edited that theatrical re-release. It changes the entire premise of the whole fucking series.
The Han shot first theory.
There's not a theory. It's true. It really happened, and then
Uh-huh.
they changed history. It was the ultimate false flag.
The ultimate Mandelu. Cool, guys. Well, we'll wrap it up. You gentlemen want to give any promotions to your own channels or works you got happening at the moment?
You go, Gabe.
Let's see. I think something's coming out pretty soon on the King of Cups with the show I did with Chris a while back on nostalgia and how everything is kind of gearing the minds of the masses back to like the turn of the age from the 80s to the 90s, like we were talking about tonight, and thereby putting us in a mindset for another, 9/11 ritual of whatever sort. So yeah, that one's probably going to pop up pretty soon. Keep an eye out for that. And other than that, I don't think I'm doing very much. I've been on hiatus for the past month. I'll probably be on hiatus for a couple more weeks. I got my kiddo with me. But yeah, after that, we'll be back in the saddle over on the one-on-one show, Rising from the Ashes with Danunaki Dan and Miriam and Indy and our boy Homie Romy. And then, yeah, catch me over with one-on-one and Weaving Spiders Webs. There's all kinds of hours and hours over there.
And Gabe and I, a couple weeks ago, were brainstorming a comic book that he might be appearing in. I'm not going to give too much more away, but it's going to be crazy. Imagine Gabe as like the ruler of a comic book surreal psychedelic dimension. So you'll see that pretty soon. And then speaking of comics, I do have a couple I would love.
Did he take kingship by dance fighting?
I mean, there's plenty of time to work that in, man. But here's my MK Ultra pamphlet. If anyone's not already familiar, this is my go-to. This is the one that I suggest people check out the first. It's a pamphlet that breaks down the entire history of the MK Ultra program, from Bluebird to Artichoke to Derby Hat to anything you can imagine. It's got names, dates, and court cases cited. And then this one is brand new that I just released with Juan. This is the Homunculus Owner's Manual. And this one shows you the complete history of alchemical, spiritual, magical, different types of homunculi, what you can do with them, all sorts of different concepts. This one right here is the Crowleyan homunculi that he describes in Moonchild. This is the most definitive and illustrated book on homunculi I think that's ever been produced so far, at least in this century, which is pretty cool. And then the other podcast that I've been doing, just a quick shout out if you want to follow some other like really cool people. I do the Occult Book Club with Juan from the One-on-One podcast. It's a little bit irregular, but if you just go to occultbookclub.com, it'll show you a bunch of episodes that Gabe has also been involved in. I do Reality Czars with Nate. I just posted an interview we had with Tommy Chong today. So if you check out my Paranoid American YouTube, you can see that. I do a series called Occult Disney that you can also find on my YouTube.
Tommy Chong?
The Tommy Chong, yeah. We talked to him last Friday about Bigfoot, MK Ultra, channeling spirits. It was wild, man. I can't wait to do more on that one. And then what else? I do Sync Tank with Andre Zertis on Tuesdays, and a bunch of my other friends that do all kinds of awesome creative endeavors. And then finally, I'm starting another one on Saturdays. I work with Tommy Truthful of Truth Mafia TV, and we do Conspiracy Cinema Saturdays, where we watch pretty much like the newest movies coming out, and we sort of decode them like we do here, although it goes way off the rails into the gematria. Like, I got to get you on one of those, Gabe.
Yeah,
and you too, Chance.
Sweet, man. So we also got Thomas coming up on a Vibrant a week from this Wednesday. So not the next Wednesday, but the one after that. We've got a great show coming up there, and hoping to see Gabe join me on the Vibrant this Wednesday. It's going to be good. And all right, we'll wrap it up. Thanks everyone for going on this 2-hour, 50-minute ride covering a show that's only about 45 minutes long. I hope you guys had fun. The DeMystifiers will return. Lots of options what we could do. So we'll see what it is. But thanks for being here. Love y'all.
Love you guys.
Good night.
Big love, everyone.